Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Read and Reread. I am Angelia, and today I'm doing a tag. It's an original tag created by Melinda from a web of stories called the Bronte Novels Tag. And she created this tag to celebrate the event that she is hosting this month called March on the Moors, which is all about reading books by the Bronte sisters. And I'm a Bronte fan. I'm not reading one right now because March is absurdly overstuffed, but I highly support the reading of the Sisters Bronte. So I want to do Melinda's tag. There's these great prompts inspired by Bronte novels, but the answers could come from anywhere in your reading history. So do not be daunted if you haven't read any Bronte novels. Anyone can do this tag. Number 1 is Agnes Grey, a book about women in the workforce. I did read Agnes Grey. That is a novel about a young woman who goes out and seeks work as a governess to help support her family financially. And she, in her young foray out into the working world as a teacher, she encounters some, shall we say, peculiar idiosyncrasies of her wealthy bosses, some teaching challenges among their privileged children, and it was an interesting book to read about her experiences as a young woman trying to teach for the first time in the middle of the 1800s and actually seeing things that directly related to my teaching experience in the 20th century and 21st century. So anyway, I did read and enjoy Agnes Grey, and I think some people are currently reading it right now, so I hope they are enjoying it too. All right, a book about women in the workforce. For this one, I chose Agatha of Little Neon by Claire Luchette. I've talked about this book before, but it's been a while since I recommended it. This was a book I read a couple of years ago. It was definitely on my Quiet Gems list that year. This is a book about a young woman named Agatha who, as a very, very young woman, maybe in her late teens, joined a convent. And now I don't know, I think she's maybe late 20s or early 30s at the time of this story. And she has lived in this group of 4 women. They are so close. She says at one point that it feels like they are one body with different essential parts that just function together. They live together, they work together, they run a preschool. And at the beginning of the story, financial misfortune has befallen the Catholic Church after a number of lawsuits and allegations that we're all aware of, but that's not really what the story's about. But things are being restructured. And also a Montessori school was opened where they live, and the attendance is down at the preschool. So the preschool is closed. Their mother superior is sent to a retirement home. And this quad of young women are sent to manage a halfway house in Rhode Island. And that's Little Neon. It's a bright pink building. They don't have any experience in this field. They're just told to go and minister to the people that live in this house and manage the household. So that's a big shocker and a big change right there. And then when they get there, Agatha is pulled to go teach algebra at the local high school because somebody has abruptly quit. And that is when she really enters the workplace. So for the first time, she is among just a diverse group of people that are not part of a convent, not part of her little insular group of close friends and sisters, really, in more than one way. So she's interacting with men and women, people of different ages, and also her students. And then also there's the things going on at the halfway house. And all of this begins to open Agatha up to what it's like to live and operate in the real world, and that her set of skills and beliefs don't apply adequately to every situation. The world is more complicated than that. People's needs are more complicated than that. And she also begins to reckon with some of the things about herself that led her to join the convent in the first place at such a young age. Something I really love about this book is that it is told from a later time when she's looking back at all these events. And the story is not, and then I got out in the world and saw what it really was, and it was a joyous uprising. That's not how it is. It's more bittersweet. There's a lot of pain. There's a lot of loss, even in the growth that she experiences within herself. So it's much more subtle than that. And I really love this book. But when I thought about a woman going out in the workplace, I thought about how Agatha, her life changed in a way that she had not planned on, that she would not have chosen. But that's what happened. And the experiences that she had once she did get out of her little bubble and experience the world. The next prompt is Jane Eyre, a coming-of-age novel centered on a female character. I love Jane Eyre. That's the one that I have read many times and that I feel it's kind of bubbling up. It's been probably about 3 or 4 years. It's about time to read it again. So maybe for Booktober. So I chose a book that I watched Pat's video from Book Chat with Pat. She also used this book, but I think she used it for a different prompt. And I'm going to use it for coming of age. And that is Brooklyn by Colm Tóibín. But I love this book. This is another quiet gem. I think, was it from last year or the year before? I'm losing track of time and space. But this is a book, I've talked about this book a number of times, and its sequel, you know what, it had to be a couple years ago because last year Long Island came out, which was a sequel, which I also love. Read both of the books. They're both fantastic. This is about young Eilish. It doesn't tell her exact age, but she seems college agey-ish in this book, late teens, early 20s. And she leaves Ireland in 1950 to go seek a job in Brooklyn. Everything is new. Everything is different. She's deeply homesick. She begins a job in a department store. She meets a young man. She is taking classes because she has a real talent for accounting and bookkeeping. And she was doing some of this work in her small town in Ireland, but she doesn't have the U.S. credentials. So she begins taking night classes to study that. It's a story of quiet firsts in Eilish's life that are huge and seismic events for her, even though in the overall scope of the world, they're not cataclysmic. They're the things that happen to everyone. You grow up, you leave home, you have to live in a strange place, you have a landlady and she's weird, and you get a job and your manager is kind of difficult, and you meet a guy and how do you feel about him? All of these things, but it is so beautifully rendered. And then something does happen in this book, kind of late in the book, that I don't want to spoil it. I don't want to tell you what it is, but something happens that requires her to make a trip back home and really make some decisions for the first time in her life, not carried away on the tides of what other people have set up for her. And I just love the whole thing. And Eilish is a really interesting and puzzling character through both novels that I really like thinking about. The next question is The Professor, a book by a favorite author that is not your favorite. And Melinda picked this one because she wasn't crazy about The Professor. And she says in her video, it doesn't mean that you have to pick a book that you despise or intensely dislike or even dislike at all. Just a book that by an author that you have really loved and loved many of their books. And this one just isn't quite it. And so for that prompt, I have chosen Dr. No by Percival Everett. I did not dislike this book. I actually enjoyed it, but in the overall scope of the several books, 5 or 6 books that I have read so far by Percival Everett, it is my least favorite. Dr. No is a goofy book. There's a lot of parts that are really funny. It's a spoof on James Bond films, and it's about this guy who's a professor who's an expert in nothing, and that creates a lot of word jokes about, well, what do you study? Nothing. What's the meaning of nothing? Like nothingness, nothing jokes. And I gotta say, it gets a little old after a certain point when they just keep he just keeps recycling different encounters where the guy has to explain how he's an expert at nothing. They're trying to steal a box out of Fort Knox that I don't know I can't even remember what's supposed to be in the box. But anyway, there's this whole caper that goes on. And I'm not really a big James Bond fan. I don't dislike James Bond, but I'm just not into it. I've never read any of the books. I have seen some of the movies. I'm just not into it. So I think if you were a big James Bond fan and a big Percival Everett fan, that would be the perfect combination for somebody to really love this book. But I'm not really that person, and to me, I like the kind of bizarre and humor and oddball elements that when he puts them into a more substantial story. This one was just all the oddballatry just run amok. It's just absolutely absurd story. So it is kind of fun, but there's not really much to it, so it wasn't my favorite one. Therefore, that's why it got selected for this prompt. And no, I have not read the book The Professor, and now I don't want to because it doesn't sound very good. All right, number 4 is Shirley, a book about female friendship. I have not read Shirley either, but I would like to. And the book that I chose about female friendship is one that I read fairly recently, and it is The Animators by Kayla Ray Whitaker. This was one of those times where I bought a book and then it sat around for about a year before I finally got to it, and then I really loved it. I learned about this book through a recommendation by Priscilla at Evening Reader, who has spoken highly of it on a number of occasions. And based on that, one day I found a copy of it on Thrift Books, and then it sat around, and finally I read it. I said when I reviewed it, I'm pretty sure, that this book is the answer to anybody who was disappointed by Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin, who went in looking for the great epic friendship that is promised in all of the marketing for that book, and you found that it wasn't really there, that it was rather toxic friendship, just more often problematic than not. This is a different kind of book. This is about 2 women who meet in college, and they go into the field of animation, and they become very instant fast friends and collaborators. They're making independent animated films, and then they sort of blow up and become highly regarded, and not really mainstream, but well known in amongst people who enjoy animated features. So I actually learned a lot about how well, I don't know if it's accurate. I'm assuming it's accurate about how an animation team works together to create a film. But that's not really why I chose the book to talk about today. It's the friendship. The 2 women who, it's so intense and so enmeshed, and they work together and sometimes live together. And when it's working, it's really, really working. And people can't quite figure out the secret of their creative magic. And when it is not working, it is not working in really volatile ways. They both have different times where they step up and really shine for each other, and other times that they are just a disaster and a hot mess. The book chronicles them over, I don't know, maybe about 20 years of work, rise and falls, personal fallouts, reunions, supporting each other through some serious situations. And then I can't tell you what happens kind of deep in the book where, no, I can't say anything, but it's really good all the way through. And it's about a really eternal friendship. That's all I'm going to say. The Tenant of Wildfell Hall. Oh, I like that one a lot. That's a really good one. It's about a woman who divorces an abusive husband, and she leaves with her young son, and she's an artist. It was a startling concept for the time period and for the other characters in this novel. And it's oh, I need to read that one again. All right, The Tenant of Wildfell Hall, a book about someone in a toxic relationship or recovering from a toxic relationship. So for this one, we're going to travel all the way back to the 18th century with Dangerous Liaisons. This edition, the author is Pierre Ambroise Francois Chodelos de Laclos, or the correct French pronunciation of that name. And the translator of my edition is Ernest Dawson. I really love this edition that I found because it has illustrations. Here's a picture of hats and hairstyles of the aristocratic society that our main characters belonged to at the time. This is an epistolary novel about two, sort of friends. They're ex-lovers, Madame Myrtle and Valmont. I can't remember what his title is, but they are wicked people, and they write letters to one another detailing the exploits of their conquests. They love to seduce and discard people. They love a challenge. They like to overcome people's morality or ethics. They like to have affairs with married people. And then they tell each other the juicy details. And they like to set challenges for each other. And they get a lot of glee out of their destructive behavior. So their behavior is quite toxic, their relationship with various people. And then when two players who play dangerous games and know all of each other's secrets hit an impasse and have a falling out, it gets really toxic. So it is a delightfully horrible book. It's really fun, but it's really awful. Just the awful misdeeds and the destruction that they cause through all of the people that they go through in this book. It's kind of almost like a guilty pleasure type of a novel, and all of it taking place amongst the aristocratic class in France in the 1700s. It's Dangerous Liaisons. I've never rewatched the movie since the 80s. Back when it came out, the original, I think they did a remake, but the original movie with Michelle Pfeiffer and Uma Thurman and John Malkovich. I was trying to say John Lithgow, and that is not right. John Malkovich. I saw the movie, and then I read the book. And then I read the book again a couple years ago, but I haven't rewatched the movie. And I wonder if it holds up, and would it still be fun to watch? Let me know if you've seen it recently. But it's a great story. Number 6, Villette, a book about a character in a new land. I have read that book. That is about another young woman who takes a teaching job at a school. And it's pretty weird. I might need to read that one again too sometime, because I wasn't quite sure exactly. There was a business with a ghost, and I wasn't quite sure when I got to the end what exactly happened. There's a woman, she's interested in somebody, she's teaching, and I think there's a ghost. That's what I remember. But she does have to step out and go into this very unfamiliar situation, kind of like Agatha, and figure out the culture of this school and this town, and there's what she's told or the way things are presented, and then what's really going on, and she has to navigate all that stuff. So there's a lot of books that would be great for this prompt, where somebody travels to a new place or enters some sort of new relationship or job. But I started thinking about this in a post-apocalyptic kind of way, and all of the books where the world itself is still there and it's the same place, but everything is completely different. So in that way, it is a new world. And so for that, I decided to choose The Stranding by Kate Sawyer. And this is a post-apocalyptic novel that was a gift from Marsha Johansson. She read and loved it and wanted me to have a chance to read it too. So she sent this to me, I think, last year, and I really enjoyed it as well. So at the beginning of this book, a man and a woman meet on a beach at the site of a beached whale, Nick and Ruth. And the book is really more about Ruth than it is about Nick, which makes sense for these prompts, since these kind of are women-focused novels. We find out they are there for different reasons to see the beached whale, but also something terrible is happening in the world, and they're not quite sure what's going to happen next. Some sort of cataclysmic thing has started to happen, and they're getting incomplete information from place to place about what's going on, but something bad is coming. And as they are on this beach, the bad thing does come, and they end up hiding inside the whale. They go right into the mouth of the whale, and they hide inside the whale while this blinding wave of light comes across the world. And when they come back out, everything's changed, and almost everything is gone. Civilization is gone. almost all the people are gone. We know there's some kind of nuclear aspect to this, but we don't really get a clear sense about what exactly happened. But the world is gone. And so the story has basically two parts where we get Ruth's backstory in her life before this time, not so much of Nick's, mostly Ruth, and then their story going forward. They're alive. Here they are on this beach with whatever's in their backpack or whatever, and how are they going to live their lives? What kind of relationship are they going to form? How are they going to survive? What are the purposes in life when you take away all the things that you had before and all the things that you thought were important, and it's just a man and a woman and a handful of supplies? Now what? So that's where the story begins. It's really compelling. It goes on for a number of years into their future, and then we also keep hearing the story in the past. It explains kind of how Ruth is the person she is today at the beginning of the story, and then we see how they change and grow. So that is the Stranding. They enter a new world in the blink of an eye without any preparation or planning. And then the last prompt is Wuthering Heights, a book where a house or another building plays a major role. I will confess here in this prompt about Bronte novels that I DNF'd Wuthering Heights, and I have a copy, and whenever the topic comes up, I always say maybe I will try it again, but I don't know if I will or not. I don't know. I started it, and talk about toxic. That this thing was toxic. That's why I put it down. I was like, wow, these people are just horrendous. What is going on? I don't feel like reading this. So I don't know. Maybe you can provide counsel if you wish on the topic of Wuthering Heights, but I didn't read it. But book where a house plays a major role. A couple of things came to mind, and I'm going to choose Mr. Flood's Last Resort by Jess Kidd. This book is quite a delight, and I love some Jess Kidd. And in this novel, I think this was her second book, I think. And in this novel, there's a young woman named Maud, and she works as a caregiver, and she's hired, the company that she works for sends her to take care of Mr. Flood, who is this elderly, curmudgeonly man. Several people have quit this job. The last one, it is rumored, ended up having a nervous breakdown and had to be hospitalized from the experience of working for Mr. Flood. But Maud takes this job, and she kind of strikes up a fairly decent understanding with Mr. Flood. I'm not going to call it a friendship, but they are managing to work together. And she kind of joins in with him in his rebellion against his son, who wants to put him in a retirement home and get rid of his house. But this prompt is about the house. But I just will say there's a mystery. She discovers a mystery about the family, and it becomes this really kind of crazy. I can't get into all that. Let's focus on the house. But the whole thing is good. The side characters are good. Angelia, back to the house. The house is a Victorian mansion. It is falling apart. There are feral cats all over the place. It is a hoarder's just extravaganza. And when I read this book, I thought, oh my gosh, I really wish I could go to this house. I want to go in this house and investigate all the crap in this house, because it sounds just magnificent and terrifying. There's all this taxidermy stuff, and there's creepy dolls, really creepy dolls. There's mountains of National Geographics. I don't really want to deal with those. But there's just every room, it just has this horrendous jumble of possible treasures and just piles of garbage. Every room is just awful. She has to work and work and work just to carve out a basic functional portion of the kitchen. She really has her work cut out for her in this house. But the house itself, it just sounds like a thrifter's playground. I just really want to get in there and look at all this crap. I probably would need to wear a mask because it sounds pretty dusty. But Mr. Flood's house in this book really captivated my attention, and it does play a role a number of times. there's this kind of standoff all the time where he doesn't really want Maud to go in snooping around through the rooms, but she really wants to access the places he doesn't want her to go. And so she's always trying to distract him and figure out how to get into these rooms. And that's just part of the fun of Mr. Flood's Last Resort. Okay, so that's it. That is the tag. If this sounds fun to you, please give it a shot. It is wonderful fun. And thanks again for tagging me, Melinda. Everybody have a great day.